Welcome to this series. So, whenever we have a repeating thought, feeling, or behavior, it means that it's anchored into us somehow. And there's always an emotion or feeling that will anchor it in. So, this series is focused on helping us identify those feelings as the anchor to our unwanted thought, feeling, or behavior. How can I say that we're anchoring in one feeling and then repeatedly feeling another? It's because sometimes we'll allow ourselves to feel one thing because we're trying to avoid feeling another thing. And so, what it comes down to alleviate these stuck repeating patterns, is to identify that feeling that's anchored it in, to acknowledge that we're stuck, first of all, that we have this pattern, validate why we have it, accept that we have it, and then be present with the feeling that has been anchoring it in. And when we are present with this feeling, we're no longer pushing it away, we're no longer resisting it. Because you may want to say that you've been feeling this feeling all along, so feeling it isn't going to help. But this feeling that we're going to do is with presence, meaning we're no longer resisting it. We've already accepted it, so we're taking it as our own and letting it be with us. And this allows the central channel to open when we stop resisting what is. And being present with the feeling allows it to start moving again because it is energy, just like everything else. And once it starts moving again, it will go through that central channel and get unstuck. And you will no longer repeat the pattern because you've already understood. So when we are present with the feeling, we are not pushing it away, blaming anyone else, projecting it onto anyone else, denying it. We are not fabricating or justifying. We're not wishing it was different. We're not thinking about the past or the future. We're simply being with it, letting it be with us. We're doing this not for the purpose of getting rid of it. We're simply being present with it. Byproduct of this is that it is energy, and once it's no longer stuck to us, once it's no longer being held into us with the resistance, it will move on its own. And in the process of allowing that to happen, we become the version of ourselves that can process that feeling, meaning it's no longer going to be coped with. It's no longer going to be something we blame on someone else or project on someone else or deny feeling. We're no longer going to suppress or deny it or wish it was different or fight against it or feel something else instead or tell ourselves a story that helps us avoid it or do something distractive or addictive that helps us avoid it. No longer will we have to fall into those coping mechanisms, and no longer will we do what behaviors we were doing in order to avoid that feeling, because now we are a place where that feeling can go through. It can be processed and it can be handled. We're essentially maturing ourselves into that version of ourselves that can handle that feeling. And these are often anchored into us as a result of, things that happened in childhood or experiences that were overwhelming or traumatic, things we've maybe held onto a misunderstanding about or just haven't been able to face fully. And it starts affecting us in ways that we don't necessarily notice or correlate to the feeling that we're avoiding, because it gets pushed into our subconscious where we don't really pay attention to it much. And our ego has this way of behaving to cope with any scenario that would cause us to potentially feel that. And so sometimes this is as simple as we have a habit of pushing people away because we have an unprocessed heartbreak. So our ego pushes people away so that we don't potentially have to feel that heartbreak. And you start feeling it a little and you push it away, or maybe you're no longer even conscious that that hurt it lives within you. And the behaviors become unconscious because they're programmed in as the way to cope with that, or the way to avoid having to cope with that. So we get into these reactive states, and if we don't slow down and take notice of what these reactive states are, we can repeat them for a long time. But eventually, when it's time for them to be noticed, you'll notice the pattern of them. You'll notice that, oh, I always do this when that happens. Or why do I keep repeating this behavior that I don't want? Or why does this thought keep recurring to me? Once you notice the pattern, you know that it's time for you to address that. So in this series, we'll be addressing a bunch of different feelings. You can actually search for a specific feeling if you've identified something that you want to address, or you can go through the series and go along through each feeling in the series. If you don't feel like this is a feeling that really affects you or you need to do work on, you are welcome to stay along and hold space for those who are working through that feeling. By becoming part of the group of collective that is participating in this, you are a strength when you have already processed and already have the ability to hold space for that feeling. So it is helpful for you to participate if you are called to, if it is in, your highest excitement to do so. So this series can be kept as a resource for when something does come up. And the basic thing that this series is doing is just helping you hold space for the feeling. I'm going to talk about the formula and walk us through the steps, and then encourage you to spend time with the feeling while I do so as well. And there'll be times where I encourage you to take the time to spend time with the feeling for a small amount of time by pausing the video and doing it on your own. Really get to customize what your comfort level is with it. But some of these feelings are really scary to this inner part of us. So the point is just to hold space for you, to be with you so that you don't feel alone when you're feeling and processing this feeling. And if this is beneficial to you, I hope that you will let me know, participate, pass it along to someone who you think might also enjoy it. And sometimes I'm going to be using my cards to guide us into what feeling we should address. And sometimes I'll be choosing something from the comment section if there's someone who's presented something that they'd like to address. So feel free to make it your own. The meditation that's included is to help get us into the space that will make this work easier. And as you become more comfortable, you can continue on with the meditations and following along, or you can skip that section if you know that you can get into the space without having to go through the meditation. Use it for what it's worth to you. Use it how it works for you. Feel free to ask questions. Subscribe just to have it as a resource for when you do need it, if it's not something that you need to do right now. But this is the beginning of becoming the version of you that can feel this feeling. Here we're going to use a meditation to enhance the effects of the process we're doing. So I invite you to begin by taking some deep breaths. Now you pray that space above you that you're praying to. I want you to imagine source light coming down from that space. It comes down, it enters your crown, and fills up your head. The source light fills your neck and your shoulders. The light fills your arms and your fingers and your chest and your torso and your hips. And you imagine the light entering into your thighs, knees, down your calves, your ankles, into your feet, and to your toes. With this light completely filling your body, I invite you to envision pushing cords of the light down out the bottom of your feet, down into the center of the earth. Here you can imagine the cords rooting into the center of the earth, or even tying off to a pole down there. Once you're anchored down into the earth, I invite you to invite Mother Earth's loving energy to come back up those cords and to enter your body, filling your feet, your legs, your center, your arms, your throat, your neck. So now you are connected above and below. I invite you to bring these energies to a meeting point at your heart. As you bring these energies to meet at your heart, I invite you to form a bubble around your heart with these energies. When the bubble has been formed, you can expand the bubble to include your whole chest, expand to include your whole body, and expand your bubble to include the whole room that you're in. Expand the bubble to include the building that you are in, the area that you're in. Expand the bubble to include your entire town. Expand to include your entire state, county, include your entire country. Expand your bubble to include Earth. You to feel invited to expand your bubble even further past the constraints of time and space. Then push your bubble out even further than that. Connected to all that is in a very conscious way. Here it is easier to affect change. There exists a divine blueprint of your well-being and wholeness. You can imagine this up above you. I invite you to bring your energy up and connect to your divine blueprint as if your energy is now reading the blueprint, reminding yourself of your wholeness, healthy way of being. Here I present to you the violet flame energy, simply intending it. You can take hold of this energy. As you take hold of it, I invite you to run the energy down your entire body. This violet flame transmutes dark, dense, stuck energy, pushing it down the body and pushing anything that can be moved at this time down, down, down. We ask Mother Earth to take the energy, to cleanse it for us, and return it to us in the form of rainbow love water. I invite you to imagine Mother Earth is now raining down the cleansed version of your energy upon you. Little drops of various colors joining back with you, purified sense, lending to your health and your wholeness and your well-being. Sense of peace and harmony fully restored. You can repeat this process of bringing your energy up to your blueprint to read it, using the violet flame to brush down your body and push into the earth, where Mother Earth cleanses and returns to you in the form of rainbow love water. Purified version of your energy, you to match your divine blueprint. You can repeat this process for as long as it feels comfortable to you. I also invite you to imagine setting a timer for this process to continue, paying attention to it. Timer for 48 hours. This 48 hours, I will be sure to hydrate well. As the body continues to cleanse and purify. Tended it. This relaxed state, connected to the all, begin our work. Okay, now let's get into the specific feeling that we are addressing in this episode. Today we're going to look at and feel guilt. So there's a couple ways this could be happening for you. Could be feeling this underlying guilt feeling, and maybe you've been trying to push it away and you just notice it, but you haven't really been fully present with it. So it's been persisting. And another way is that you could be full on avoiding it, and not letting yourself feel it and distracting yourself fully. And you may be really successful at doing that. And it could be the anchor point for some situation or some way of coping, some pattern that you've been stuck in. So if you've come to the point where you know that guilt could be the anchor feeling, or guilt is the feeling that you know is present, let's focus on guilt. First, you're acknowledging it. So you're either acknowledging that you have some guilt to feel, or that you've been trying to avoid feeling some guilt. Validate yourself. You could validate yourself on why you don't want to feel the guilt, or you could validate yourself on why you actually feel guilty. The reason I've chosen guilt today is because I had a guilt creeping up. And in all honesty, I don't believe that I have reason to be guilty or feel guilty. I don't think I've done something wrong. But I know that there is someone whom I love who expects something of me. And I know that they don't have a right to do that. I know that I can't possibly please them no matter what I do, even to try to fulfill their expectations. I could jump through endless hoops and they would still not be satisfied. But I think it goes back to childhood because it is my mother who is the one who I feel has these expectations of me. And I think that guilt was probably used to keep me in line, you know, and to be willing to jump for her expectations and do what she expected of me. And if you've seen some of my other videos, then you know I talk a lot about fair relating and how ideally we wouldn't have expectations of each other and we wouldn't be attached to an outcome, meaning no one has to fit in a box to please us, that we are allowing people to be who they are, and that if we're in relationship with another person, that we have an agreement about how we show up in it. So that it's something that's all out in the open, that both people know about. There's nothing covert going under the radar where somebody is subtly putting pressure on or coercing or manipulating or trying to tell a story that makes someone else feel like they're at fault, you know? So in my case, I know logically that I should not feel guilt and that I haven't done anything wrong and that I'm allowed to not live up to the expectations of my mother. And still, the feeling is there, so I know that it's unprocessed. And I know that even though this hasn't been something that's been happening a lot, I know it's happened before. I know it's happened before, and it's like in the past I addressed this on another layer. Like I addressed this on another level. And in fact, like up until about age 40, I would never tell my mother no. I would always jump when she wanted. She had me doing things for her, even towards other people in her life. You know, just being her bodyguard and her bully and just awful things that when looking back, I can't believe. And, you know, it was my siblings that sort of brought it to my attention that it was something that I did. And I knew that it was me still living out the pattern of my childhood where I was trying to get her approval. And it could never happen. So about age 40, so that's 9 years ago now, I was able to stop that behavior and, you know, heal to a certain level. And what this is now 9 years later, I've become the version of myself who can heal it on a deeper level. So there's a deeper level that is ready for me to heal, and that is why this is coming up again. And so I'm going to take this opportunity and I'm going to share it with you in our series. So, even though my logical mind might think it's not valid for me to feel guilt, I know that it's valid for me to feel this guilt because I know it's lodged in me as something my younger version, the child version of me, was overwhelmed by and misunderstood and couldn't fully process. So it's valid that it's coming up now. It's valid for me to look at this and actually be with guilt because my inner child needs me now, this version of me, to show her that we can now process this. We can now mature into the version of ourselves that can process guilt. And processing guilt doesn't mean that we own it or that we've done something wrong. It just means that if that feeling should arise, that we can be the version of ourselves that still loves ourselves through the experience of that arising. Only the story we tell could decide if we own it as our own or not. So this young version of me may have owned it, meaning it's my fault. I couldn't have blamed my mother because that would cut me off from the only care that I was trying to get, that I had a possibility of getting. So it had to be my fault. And that's a misunderstanding. And that misunderstanding was the story I told. The story I told was that it's my fault. And that misunderstanding lodged that feeling in to me because I owned it as I did something wrong. I am wrong. I'm not good enough for her. And so now it's valid for me to feel this. Let's accept that this is where I'm at. I am a 49-year-old woman. I'm not laughing at you, I'm laughing at me. And, laughter is another way to move energy. Besides tears, laughter does it too. So it's not meant to be self-deprecating when I laugh. It just struck me as funny to think that I'm a 49-year-old woman still suffering from the guilt of not pleasing her mother. Because it's like, oh, if I got to 49 and I still haven't pleased her, it's a lost cause, right? So let's accept that this is where I'm at. I don't have to feel guilty about it, but I'm going to be present with my guilt because I, as a little girl, decided it was my fault that I couldn't please her. Okay, so this is where I'm at. Still at 49, having that pattern arise. And I can feel the heaviness of it all kind of coming up present as I accept it. I'm no longer pushing away, and I'm just like, this is the reality of it. And then I can feel, some stuff stirring in me, like this energy is just like, oh, like it's our time to shine now. Like, oh, you're paying attention to this energy now, okay? And it's like, yeah, I am, and now I'm ready to be present with guilt. And so in order to help me elicit that feeling, I remember, and I don't have to go back too far in my memory because this pattern has still been going on. I remember my mother saying things to me in a tone that insinuates that I should be doing something to alleviate her inconvenience. And and insinuating that I am an inconvenience. Oh, wow. Yeah. Oh, obviously, the way that I've come by guilt might be different than the way you've come by guilt. It's entirely possible that you have done something that is what you consider wrong. And so, just for healthy measure, I'm going to elicit a memory of a time I've done something wrong that I felt guilty for. Oh, yes, I have a memory. Because there was a time where I was less conscious of my actions and I just reacted to things. And I remember doing something that I later wished I hadn't done. And I'm not going to tell you what it was, but it was something towards someone else. It was a retaliation. And, when I think about having done that, I do feel guilty. I feel like I shouldn't have done that to that person. Even if they hurt me, which they did. Even if they broke our agreement, which they did. Even if they started treating me like trash, which they did. That was from their own pain. And instead of being able to take the high road back then, I had no idea that that was even an option. I was just acting out my impulses and reactions. And back then, I was programmed to react to those kind of hurts in a sometimes spiteful way. And I did something that she probably never knew about. Affected her. Gonna elicit that feeling of guilt over that incident if I can. I have forgiven myself for it, so Not sure that I still have lingering guilt over it, but I wanted to share that as an example in case the guilt that you're needing to process has its roots in something you feel like you should be taking responsibility for, that you did do as a mistake, or maybe you were unconscious at the time, maybe you were reactive, you know. But even in these cases, after we are present with this feeling, you may come into the realization that you were doing the best you can with what you had, that you only had a certain perspective at that time. You were reacting in your pain and you didn't have any other better coping mechanism at that time. And maybe you did learn from that experience that the way you acted wasn't something you wanted to continue to do. So maybe you even adapted your behaviors away from continuing to do that. Or maybe it's a pattern of you always doing something in response to certain stimuli that are hurtful. But whatever it is, whatever your reason for guilt or trying to push guilt away, know that it's valid for you to feel this guilt today. We've accepted that this is where you're at. Now we're present with the feeling of guilt. Okay, so not pushing it away, not wishing it was different. This feeling of guilt is allowed to be with us. We're not blaming anyone. We're not telling a story about it. We're not thinking about the past or the future. We are just right now to elicit memories and your story to help the feeling come up while you have this other part of your consciousness be brave enough to know that you can be present with this guilt without harming yourself or anyone else, that you will just be here right now. This feeling is allowed to be here. There may be a tearful release. Encourage you to allow yourself to cry. If you can cry, it's okay if you're not crying also. You're just being with guilt, feeling that you did something wrong. To have deemed yourself as having done something wrong, it means that you didn't live up to your own values or integrity. And in my case with my mother, I had a value that I would always aim to please her. So when I didn't live up to that, that's when I started to feel guilt. So this experience for me is identifying for me that I need to look at my values again. What is important to me? Is it more important to me that I please my mother? Or should I be more concerned with what is the right thing for me to do? I need to reprioritize, it sounds like, my values. Values is just what's important to me. And then to be in integrity is to live by my values. And then when I do that, when I'm very well aware of what's important to me, then I can help myself make the decisions to do the things that are in line with my values. Then I won't find myself out of integrity and I won't end up feeling guilty in the future. But for right now, it is totally valid for this guilt to be here. Take some deep breaths, stay hydrated if you need to. So if you start to feel yourself telling a story like I just did about how things are going to be different, or justified reason why you shouldn't have to feel it, or anything like that that feels like a distraction, it's important that you bring your focus back into the present to be present with guilt. It's very common for our ego to try and protect us from feeling this, and so distractions can come up. Even if you got a phone call or a knock at the door, it's okay to return back into this and continue being present with guilt. You can start again from the beginning of the process if needed, or just pick up where you left off, whatever feels right to you. So we're not doing this so that the energy moves, the energy of guilt, but you may start to feel it move. Doing this on its own, just by virtue of being energy, energy moves on a wave. So when we are not resisting it any longer, eventually it moves on its own. We should not intend to do it for that reason. Just being the space where the energy can return to its normal path of passing through. If you're still feeling the guilt, and you can identify that easily, I will invite you to pause the video and continue to feel and be present with the guilt for 60 seconds. You can put a timer on your phone. Just guess at the timing. But pause the video. Come back to us. Continue to feel and be present with the guilt. Attention back to being present. Whether or not this guilt is still here with us, you're still feeling it for sure. To pause the video and feel and be present with the guilt for 120 seconds. Done the 120 seconds, you can return to us, and we'll be here with you to continue being present with the guilt, if the guilt is still present. Don't feel like you need to continue to keep your presence here on guilt because you no longer feel it. You can no longer identify with it. You can finish up the process, or you can stay with us here as we hold space for anyone else who is still in the process of being present with their guilt. Part of the group that is clear and able to pass through their guilt, and who will hold space for others to do so as well. Sort of like a group effort. Now, if you are still able to sense and feel your guilt as you're being present with it, I will invite you to pause the video for 30 minutes this time and continue to be present with your guilt. There's no time limit on it. I'm simply extending the time where you feel comfortable to be present with your feelings on your own, and assuring you that when you come back, we will all be here. When I say we, I mean the collective of those who have done this process with this video at any time they've done it. Whether it's in the future, the past, or at the same time you're doing it now, or right here now while I'm recording it. If you still find yourself feeling strong guilt, though you've been being present with it, so long as you promise yourself not to hurt yourself or anyone else, I would invite you to pause the video and continue being present with your guilt, just observing it, just letting it be there. You're not telling yourself a story about it. You're not guilting yourself because you have it. You're not beating yourself up. It's not wrong for you to have it or feel it. It's okay if your mind keeps trying to distract you from it. And it's also okay if you need to put this aside and come back to it another day. But if you're prepared to, I invite you to pause the video and continue being present for yourself. We are going to finish up here. We have been present with guilt. We accepted that we were needing to process it, which opened our central channel. And now, because we were present with it, we were not resisting anymore. We allowed that energy to reactivate. And because it is energy and it moves on a waveform, it did so and it moved right through us. Now there is a place for that energy to move through us whenever it may need to, if ever again. You may have been in a loop that created a lot of situations for you to be reminded of your guilt. And you may not have to repeat that cycle anymore, or that cycle might repeat again just so you can see if there's any more residual guilt. If you ever found yourself with difficulty passing it through, you're welcome to return to this video. Use this as a resource for yourself. But we've now matured into the version of ourselves that can process guilt. I'd like to keep this as a resource. You can subscribe to the channel. Please like the video. Feel free to comment if you have a certain feeling that you'd like us to do in an upcoming video. Thank you so much for being here and for being part of the process. Thank you for tending to your emotional body and freeing yourself from limitation and challenges and suffering. I'll see you in the next one.